Shall I start speaking?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. What I'm doing in this medical matters is basing it on the way we conduct medical matters in Sage. It's to give people an opportunity to ask questions either about the present virus problem or any other medical matter, anything that anybody wants, as long as you don't want an examination, all will be fine. Any questions?
I have a question for you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, obviously, in light of the current situation, the thing that is concerning me is every time I cough, or every time Daphne coughs, we wonder is there any significant way, other than the dry cough and the possible difficulty in breathing, that you can determine whether you've just got a cold or you've got this virus thing coming on? Because as you all know, the mind plays a lot of tricks.
Yeah, okay. The main symptoms are a fever, a dry cough, loss of taste, and loss of smell. Sometimes tingling in the hands and sometimes an upset tummy. It doesn't actually matter if you've got a mild problem as to whether it's the virus or not, because it's irrelevant as far as you're concerned. And the only importance is if you're particularly unwell, and then you have to do something about it. I mean, I think we all have the odd cough, we all have the odd headache, we all have the odd aching pain.
Yeah.
The problem is a large number of people may well have had it without any symptoms whatsoever. Right. Certainly younger people. We've got absolutely no idea. It's generally thought there may be as many as 10 to 100 times as many people have had the virus as are showing in the statistics. But on the whole, if I had a bit of a cough, I would not worry in the slightest. Unfortunately, somebody will know when they're really ill.
Right, okay.
So be totally reassured about any little cough or any sore throat.
Very clear, thank you.
Pleasure.
Anybody else out there? Yeah. Hello.
Hello.
This is Martin Day.
Hello, Martin. Good afternoon to you. Hope you're both well.
I'm speaking on behalf of my wife.
Yeah.
She's been feeling sick for 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
Now she's got a headache and she feels wozzy.
Yeah.
And she wonders, has she got corona or is it something else?
The answer to that is, without a formal test, you can't really tell. I mean, the symptoms she's got can fit in with the coronavirus. There's no question about that at all. As to whether she's got coronavirus, or it's another virus, or it's something nothing to do with it at all, it's worrying, but it's not a real problem. It becomes a real problem if she becomes particularly ill with the problem she's got. We can't really detect who's got it, short of doing tests on everybody who's got any symptom whatsoever. And there is no chance of that happening at the moment. But it doesn't actually matter unless you run into major problems, particularly with breathing. No, there's nothing else that really matters unless you become increasingly ill. I mean, we've all had a flu-type virus in the past where you get the aching limbs, you get sore throat, you may get a high temperature. Most of them settle down. I mean, as I was saying to somebody previously, an awful lot of people will have had the virus without knowing it, which is no bad thing. Has that answered the question?
I think so. So you don't really think she's got it? Is that what you're saying?
I can't say categorically she hasn't got it, but what I can say, with the sort of symptoms you've got at the moment, provided they don't deteriorate to any great extent. It is absolutely nothing to worry about. Now, if there was a lot of deterioration, particularly if the breathing became more difficult, then you need to get in touch with the medical authorities.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
She should self-isolate. She should be isolating with any symptoms.
Hello again, Daphne.
All right, okay. Are you waiting for the next question?
Yes, any questions are coming or happily received.
Oh, good. Well, while you're waiting, I have another question.
You're entitled to as many as you like.
Yeah. Just quickly. We've been self-isolating, my dear Daphne and I, the last 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Except to empty rubbish into the communal dustbin, which is fine. And neither of us have any symptoms of anything really. Daphne's had this tingling sensation that you talk about.
Yeah.
But nothing other than that. So, gotta learn those. My question is this. Whilst we've been doing shopping online, there are always bits and pieces you need to get. Is there any danger now in going out to do some shopping online?
I don't think anybody of our age should be going shopping if it can be possibly avoided. Okay. Now, the fact is, if you've got this tingling, excuse me, it may well be that you have got the virus and you're capable of distributing to somebody else. So, if you must go out and shop, which I would prefer you didn't, then you're probably advisable to wear a mask. The mask is no protection to you, but it is a protection to somebody else.
Yeah, I understand perfectly. No, I mean, we're not rushing to go out. I think it's, just really the question, is there any danger? Well, of course there is. It's a dark question. I'm sorry about that.
I think it's perfectly reasonable, Jeffrey, to go out and go for your 30-minute walk or 20-minute walk as often as you like. But I would not go, I personally have not been into a shop for 3 weeks because my wife came at me with a ton of bricks and told me not to.
No, we've just been, unfortunately, Daphne's been able to order online and the delivery comes and left outside the door and so on. So that's, we don't have a problem.
Jeffrey, is that Jeffrey's Errol? Yeah.
Hello.
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 Oh, Adrian. Hi.
Yes, say hello. I'm seeing people that I don't ever see, so I'm just saying hello.
Nice to see you.
And you're glad you're well.
Yes, thank God. Carry on with your question to Ian.
A question?
Another one.
Happily to receive any questions from anybody.
Can I just comment? I've just joined you, but it sounded like one of the callers said she might have the symptoms. Surely that person should stay in and the person that's living with her not go out for walks. Let's hear the question.
Yeah, I can't see any reason if you've got very mild potential symptoms why you shouldn't get a breath of fresh air outside, as long as you don't come into contact with anybody else, as long as you go into a shop. Because if you say to everybody that's got any cough at all, or any slight sore throat, or any other potential symptom, you'd probably be very unlucky to find anybody who hasn't got the odd symptom. But don't go near other people.
Well, I think with some people you see walking around and you have to avoid them, it's easier said than done.
Well, we found...
With all respect, I'm just wondering how sensible it is if somebody's got any sign of a symptom that they should actually stay in their own home until they're free from the symptom.
It's a perfectly reasonable opinion. It's not something I would argue with. I think it has to be up to the individual as to how they want to do things, in view of the fact this may go on for a considerable amount of time. I found that when I've been out, people have been extraordinarily reasonable, going into the middle of the road, and at no time in the last 2 weeks have I been nearer than 10 to 12 feet, remembering that the droplets can't actually travel more than about 6 feet.
Okay. Thank you.
Pleasure.
I'm with her. I agree with her.
Interestingly, my wife agrees with you, but I'm not sure I do. But then she's had a sore throat and she's been out, so.
Well, you know what they say about women, dare I say?
Yeah, precisely.
I'm the one who's had the tingles, and generally what I do, I walk round. I'm lucky because we've got rather large garden and grounds, and I walk round. I've been walking round the grounds rather than walking in the street, so I haven't been taking it outside really.
My Machutten thinks she'll never have to cut the grass again because she's walked around it so many times over the last 2 weeks.
Well, that's it. I've
Yeah.
been lucky.
I think that's a very sensible approach.
Just coming back again on the symptoms and trying to recognise the symptoms as soon as you can. Like I said, the only symptom or potential symptom that Daphne's had is this odd tingling in her
There's a strange feeling in my arm.
No, nothing else.
What's happened is, since it first began in China 12, 13 weeks ago, people have described a number of symptoms at the early onset. Now, whether these are relevant or not, it's very difficult. Some people get tingling because they're anxious. Some people get tingling because they've got a pain in the neck.
Yeah. Sure.
I would be more sure if the tingling was followed by other symptoms as well. It's such a common sort of sensation.
Sure.
Don't shout. You don't need to shout.
Daphne says yes. Now that you mention it, she thinks she might have a pain in the neck again.
Sitting next to her. How screws it sitting next to her?
I feel I can't comment on that particular problem.
There you are. Well, there you are. Very nice too. So you cured Martin's wife. That's very good.
Are there anybody? Is anybody else out there?
I'm here. I don't know if you can. I can't see myself. It's Bruce.
I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I'm here.
Do you wish to ask a question?
When I was just listening to you, and my husband says isolation is isolation. If you've got any symptoms, you should not be out. That's what he feels, and I think I tend to agree with him. We've had so much bad news in the last few days that I think the less we spread ourselves, the better it is.
I think the answer to that is whatever you are comfortable with. The one thing, it's more a matter of what you shouldn't do. You shouldn't socialise. You shouldn't spend time talking to somebody over the fence. If you want to restrict yourself further than that, because that's what you have confidence in, I think that's perfectly reasonable. Somebody has just picked up some fruit from our house. Their spouse refuses to go out of the house. And again, that is perfectly acceptable. I mean, you know, you can do better than they say. You don't have, as long as you don't do worse.
I agree. I go for my quick walk. Today I actually even covered my face because my kids are telling me don't walk without a mask.
Well, this is going to become more interesting over the next couple of days. It may well be that it's going to be recommended that anybody going out wears a mask. But be aware, the mask is a protection for others. It's not a protection for you. And one of the dangers of a mask is feeling that you can socialise more with one than without one. And that's a very dangerous pastime.
I don't talk to anybody, I just walk, but I do feel that I don't know. I'm just worried there's something in the air because it just seems to be getting so bad at the moment.
The problem, as I say, is the mask will not prevent anything coming from the air to you, but it will prevent you coughing on the air and then producing it. The virus cannot live in the air itself. It's got to be living in a droplet. Viruses do not have an independent lifestyle.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello?
Hello, yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can hear and see you.
Are you going to see me?
Yes.
Can you see me?
Well, I can see two young ladies sitting on your lap. Anyway.
That's so bad. No, those are my children. They're not sitting on my lap. They don't live there.
Oh, I see. Oh, I see. Oh, well, fine.
I don't know how to show my picture. I don't really want to. What I want to ask you is, you said is what you pick up as you're walking around. So when you come in walking, which I'm not comfortable with either, what do you have to do? Do you have to put your coat in the washing machine? Do you have to
No. If you touch a hard surface, for instance, going through a gate, be it metal or wood, then you should immediately wash your hands when you get into the house. You do not have to wash your coat, because unless somebody has come very close to you and coughed and spluttered all over your coat will not have the virus on it.
Okay, so may I ask you another question?
You may. Yeah.
Say I've been walking and someone had been walking there just before and it has sneezed or coughed. Surely my shoes are going to have to be clean when I get to disinfect.
Sorry, did you say that if you've coughed or sneezed?
No, somebody else.
Just before me walked by.
No.
I'm bringing it in the house.
Yeah, if you're out and somebody within 6 feet of you coughs and splutters, then there is a potential that it will rest on you or your clothes. But the likelihood of that happening if you never go nearer than 6 feet, it's certainly, if it's more than 6 feet, there can't be any danger whatsoever. The droplets, even with a very severe cough, travel between 4 and 5 feet.
Okay.
And then we'll go to the ground. And the 2 meters that's been sort of suggested is to give you an extra protection. For instance, if you're walking one side of the road and somebody coughs dreadfully on the other side of the road, it's impossible for it to have any effect.
Okay.
It does not travel in the air like sort of pollen.
Okay.
Hi, Trina.
Hi, Daphne. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. I'm all right. I'm hanging in there.
Yeah, we all.
I find these podcasts are really good.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Did you see Neil yesterday?
No, I've only been on a few. Yeah. Okay.
Keep well. Take care.
And you too, Daphne. How do you put your picture on? No idea.
Press video. Press
How do you
video.
put your picture on?
Press.
And at the top, listen. Press.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Press your.
Yeah, I have.
And at the
Yeah.
top, it will say stop. There's a video.
Okay, I've started the video, and it's still my children. How interesting.
Oh, hello.
There you are. Nose.
Turning it off. Just have a fright. Where start video? Yeah, go on, you do it, Ruth. Got to read. Oh, there you are. Hi, Ruth.
Hello.
I had a big R there before. That was actually better. Yeah. Daphne, you're missing the hairdresser.
Yes, can't you see?
I am too. That's why I turned the video off. Yeah, I know. Sunday I'm going to try and colour it. Oh, you guys.
No.
Here's somebody. Who's somebody? Hello?
Hello.
comforting here to see everybody in their natural state.
Well, I was going to say it's nice to see everybody au naturel, but it doesn't actually sound right, so I won't say it. I can hear you perfectly well, yes.
Just a question that's been bothering me. The newspaper, when it's delivered, I don't know if you can answer it. Can we touch it, or should we leave it, or should I just cancel my newspapers?
Do you know, that's an interesting question, because we get our news on the iPad now, and I'm quite pleased that I do, because I'm not really sure of the answer to that question. What I would do is perhaps leave it for an hour or so, take whatever the covering is off, thoroughly wash your hands, and then read the newspaper. And that probably is safe.
They had this question on television actually, and they said it's highly unlikely that you will get anything from a newspaper because the print is very fine.
Yeah.
Right. It was one of the questions given to a doctor on
Yeah.
one of the news items. He said that is very unlikely. But if you get an Amazon package or something like that, you really do need to spray it and use rubber gloves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
A lot of the newspapers are doing some scheme to deliver the papers to you, so they're not sort of going through the news agents and all that.
I see. Yeah. Well, you see, we always used to get the Times, which came in cellophane, and if that happened now, I'd leave it for a short while, take the cellophane off, wash my hands, and read the paper. And it's inconceivable that anything would be left on the news sheet.
One of the advantages of getting the Times online, in other newspapers online, as I did this morning, I was able to read it at 3:15 this morning.
That must have been a great benefit to you.
It was, because I couldn't sleep.
No.
So I'm doing it. So I'm not very tired. So, you know, and when my dear wife wakes me up because she's off or something, and then so I get up and read the paper, which is lovely, which you can't do if you're waiting for it to come the following morning. So there you are.
No, I find it. I just wish there was a little bit more cheerful in the newspapers.
It's incredible. They never publish from people. For example, somebody said this morning, one of your friends stuff in conversation on the telephone, said that 90 or people have come home from hospital. There's a lovely Rita Hammerman.
Hello, Rita.
I'm calling Pete. Hi, Francis. Turn your mute off. Another thing, Ian, that's another thing. The news only tells you, as Daphne said, the bad stuff. They don't tell you about the amount of people who actually go into hospital and thank God come out.
Yes. Basically, they haven't got too many statistics about that. The most important statistic is that the majority of people will have almost no symptoms whatsoever. And they haven't yet got an awful lot of details about people coming out. My son, who works in a hospital, was very cheered last week when they did discharge 3 people, but it's not a lot.
So what happens when people come out of isolation, may have not had the coronavirus, no testing? Are they then going to come out and get this virus? Because everyone will be quite scared to socialise again.
I think if you've been in sorry, you're talking about people in hospital or at home? No, I mean, this is going to be the real major problem. I mean, the idea of bringing, you know, there are two sorts of tests. There's an antigen and an antibody. The antigen test tells you if you've got it. The antibody test tells you if you've had it. And it's going to be the antibody test that determines how we lead the next 6 months. Because you're absolutely right. Unless you know whether you've had it or you haven't had it, you don't know whether A, you're going to get it again, or B, whether you're free to go around. So it's very difficult. I think most of the people who have been admitted to hospital, they will have had tests. They will know they've had it, and they will know that probably for the next 6 months, they're not likely to get it again. Because that's the other problem. We do not know how long the immunity lasts.
And the vaccine.
Well, the vaccine is unlikely to be here much before the beginning of next year.
And a question for you. When it's all over, please come very soon. Do you think everybody should ask to be tested? Go to your doctor, as you normally do, and ask, can you tell me if I had it?
Again, if there are the facilities for doing this, yes. I mean, they've said they're going to get 3.5 million tests done, but in view of the fact that the maximum they're getting of the other tests is around about 10,000, which is grossly too few, I wouldn't be too sure about it. The likelihood is, over the next 12 months, most of us will come into contact with the virus, most of us will probably get it, and most of us will not be poorly. And certainly the younger generation, the children. I mean, we all heard about the tragedy of the 13-year-old die. Please God, that will be very, very few and far between. Our grandchildren are of very little danger whatsoever.
And as we go on, does the virus actually get stronger, or does it actually weaken?
There's a suggestion. I mean, again, it's a brand new virus, so nobody knows. Nobody can give you the answer to that. There is a suggestion from previous viruses that they all weaken in the warm weather. So the hope is that come late May, June, July and August, things will be much milder. We may all develop some immunity, but the worry is probably next October, November, December, it will come back to those who haven't already had it.
By which time
There may be something. There certainly will be treatments available.
Yeah, cool.
I mean, there's...
The weather forecast says Sunday's going to be 20 degrees and sunny.
Yeah. Well, the answer there is if you're going out, go out. If you're sitting in the garden, sit in the garden, because the vitamin D that you will pick up from the sunshine will almost certainly give you some protection.
Good. That's me. I'm out there at the crack of dawn.
Yeah, but don't get burnt.
I'll try not to. I'll try.
And probably you should wear some clothes as well.
There's a lot of widows where I live, you never know.
I don't think we should go on with this conversation at the moment. Any more questions?
Is anybody out there?
No, you're all here. We're all here.
Oh, wait a minute. I've got a question come over on the phone, which I've got to read. I have a question. What advice would you give to parents with children who want to try and give their kids an opportunity to get some fresh air and to be out and about? Where can they go? Is it they're safe for grandchildren and grandparents to interact at all? No. As my kids said the other day when I suggested I might try and see them round about Pesach or the Seder, they do not wish to be responsible for my death. And much though they would like to inherit my wealth, they prefer to leave it a little while. There's no real danger to the kids. They're not supposed to play with other children, that makes sense. There's absolutely no reason why they shouldn't go to the park, go for a walk, kick a ball between kids and dad. There's no harm in that whatsoever. But they must not have contact with grandparents. Because no matter how fit those grandparents are, if they're round about 70 or above, the dangers are great. We will all know before this is over somebody of that sort of age who has been perfectly fit, who ceases to be so.
Oh, we've already heard of it.
I know, so have I. A friend who is very fit indeed.
We're very, very fortunate insofar as that which we are doing now, communicating on a screen, multiple times with people. That's what we do with our children and grandchildren.
Yeah. And whilst it's not quite, like everything else, it is difficult. But if you compare it with situations 100 years ago when you could have no communication, okay, if please God, we all come out of this in 3 to 6 months' time, well, it's an experience you don't wish you'd ever had, but, it's one few months out of our lifetimes.
Ian, I have another question.
Please.
I know this is like a little bit political. Do you think, knowing what was going on in China at the end of last year, that we were really prepared for this? I know that everyone wants supplies, we're competing with all over the world, but do you think that we were prepared for this? Because obviously frontline staff are not getting the equipment, they're not getting the PPE.
Yeah, there is a problem. I mean, it is easy to be wise after the fact, but it's not actually just since January we should have had preparation. 2 or 3 years ago, the health service were asked what they would do if there was a pandemic, because everybody's known that sooner or later there would be a pandemic, and things weren't done at that time that should have been done. Since we've known about the Chinese thing, we have known in this country we do not have enough reagent, really, since the early part of January. Now, I don't know whether we could have got more. I think these questions are going to be asked and answered when it's all over. On the other hand, you've got to look at the good things. The army have set up this hospital at the Excel Centre, which is an incredible thing they've done over a matter of 2 to 3 weeks.
10 days.
Yeah, 10 days. And I think it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, it's the biggest hospital in the world. And so yeah, there will be questions to be answered, and I have no doubt some people are going to find it difficult to answer some of them.
The only thing it's a shame was that to be now we're calling things in this country. We have to wait to come from here, you have to come from there. I'm sure we can do masks, I'm sure we can do other things, even ventilation. We can do things. People have been doing it, even youngsters have been doing it in Italy. So it's a shame that we're just waiting for other countries to supply. We should be producing here.
Well, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, but our manufacturing base has one way or another been considerably reduced over the last few years for one reason or another. Now, it's very impressive that Formula One have got together to produce these machines. And things will improve, but, each country, I'm afraid, will look after its own before it will look after anybody else. And Germany's always had a very much larger manufacturing base and chemical base. I mean, chemistry began in Germany, and they've kept it. I mean, the Americans tried to buy a company from the Germans, and the Germans told them to get lost.
I read this morning, and I don't know what company it was, but a company, Medi something or another, that produced ventilators, a different type, and they have given their groups
Together with 2 young kids. There were 2 children, 2 young boys. I mean, young, yeah.
But can you hear me? They've given their patent out, a secret patent, to other companies to produce more ventilators in this country. So they are trying to.
I think there's an enormous amount of effort going on. If you heard the guy, Professor Nurse, who's in charge of the centre, the Crick Centre, what he was saying on the radio this morning, everybody would like to know how to do this. Somebody's asked a question. I would like to know the correct procedure when bringing in food deliveries. We had ours delivered to the door. We rapidly put it in its plastic bags into our own containers. Those that we need to take out and put it in the fridge or freezer, we do quickly. The rest we leave. and having touched them, we then go and wash our hands. And I think that's probably the best you can do. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't not have deliveries of food, and you can't. Life has to go on, and you just all you can do is minimise the danger as best you can.
Sorry, Daphne.
Oh, you go through it.
All right, I have another question then, because if you can go to the supermarkets when you're over 70. Is that a wise thing to do? So that if I went to Sainsbury's, I know they're letting people in a few at a time, but surely by doing that you're taking a chance, and you cannot get online deliveries unless you're very lucky.
Yeah, I mean, look, you've got to do the best you can. We haven't been to any shops because we are getting online deliveries. If you can't get any online deliveries, then either one's kids or somebody else can deliver for you. And we have an arrangement with our neighbours who don't have online. We get more than we actually want, and then we take it over to them. And I gather, talking to some friends who are living just off Hartsbourne Road, there are a group round there who will actually bring things to your doorstep. I think everybody, the shul would do the same. If you can avoid going to the shop and standing in a queue, you should do so. But if there's no other way of getting your food, then you have no alternative. It's limitation of danger and damage that's important. You can't eradicate it altogether.
So is there any light at the end of this tunnel there, Ian? Because it seems to be a no-ending scenario.
Look, what they're trying to do at the moment, which is maintain facilities until it gets to its worst level, which supposedly is sometime in the next 2 weeks. Hospital beds are rapidly filling up. I mean, speaking to members of the family, there is still capacity and they want to get over that. I think once it becomes obvious that it's both levelling off and then reducing, there will be some relaxation of the restrictions. I mean, one person put it forward that they may let infant children go, or junior kids go back to school next term, and that's a possibility because it seems to be perfectly safe for them. As far as people of our age or people with health conditions, I think there will be some lifting of restrictions, but not very great.
In Sweden, what happens in Sweden, isn't it? Now it carries on as normal, and remains the Peter records that they haven't started yet. I mean, it hasn't started fully yet.
Yeah, Sweden is the only place where they're not. I mean, they've now restricted people from 500 to 50. They've got a smaller, more affluent population. I mean, look, every country is deciding its own way because nobody actually knows the right way. What the Chinese did was not only isolated people, but anybody who had it was taken out of their home and put in a hotel. Now, it worked. Whether people in this country would want that to happen is a moot point. I don't know. I mean, I think what we're doing at the moment is probably as good as it's going to get. And it's interesting how obedient most of the population, certainly people of our age. I mean, you don't see groups of people out talking now. Certainly not in Bushy.
Yeah.
Well, even they have got the message now. I mean, the rabbi who's now said he will not give an aliyah to anybody who has gone to shul is impressive.
Reading the Egyptian online, which I did early this morning also, it's incredible. They are reporting that there are still minyanim, which are taking place. The certain areas, it's decided that they don't have a virus and they're carrying on as normal. Tickets were issued to, there was a group of them who were at somebody's house, 40 of them.
Yeah, well, you know, if God forbid one of them has got it, some of them will die. I mean, 3 people who went to a bar mitzvah not so long ago are dead. Yes.
Yeah, because it's 2 weeks of incubation.
Yeah. I mean, you know, look, there are many people who don't believe in vaccinating children. There are many people who've got all sorts of ideas. And, you know, I mean, all you can do is give advice. I mean, the chief rabbi has said you must not do it. And if people aren't prepared to accept anybody's advice, so be it. You're entitled to, as long as you don't put anybody else's life at risk.
Well, that's the point. So that's why if you see anybody vaguely resembling a hazard cross the road, walk the other way. You never know.
You never know.
Ian, I'm going to leave the meeting, but thank you very much.
Okay, it's a pleasure. I hope you found it helpful anyway.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Lovely to see you.
Ian, one question of our friend Howard. Did he get back all right from Spain?
Yeah, he got back. They came back earlier. I think they came back 3 or 4 days early, and they're fine. Leslie spoke to them. Sorry?
Can't make that one up at all. Anyway, Ian, just before I go, many thanks. It's good to see you. And as is our wont, I offer you a virtual, very masculine, firm handshake. No hugging.
No hugging. Delighted to see you and delighted to see everybody's looking so well. Please, it should continue. Bye.
Bye all, and thanks a lot. And have a good Yota. Have a good Yota for all of you.
And the same to you. It'll be very different. Pleasure.
Yeah, bye, Daphne. Bye, Dol.
Bye.
Bye. Peter, what do you turn this off? Peter, what do you turn this off?
Let me see if I can. There is a keyhole